Welcome to episode 560 of the podcast. Today we're going to tackle the final stretch of how posting content can generate profits. Now, what's the mechanism for this and how does this actually work? And can it indeed work? Yes, it can work if you do ask for a sale. After demonstrating value and your expertise, you have to ask for a sale at some point. Because some people get into the habit of putting up educative or informative content and they get into the same habit of doing that over and over and over again without having to actually ask for something. Because the expectation seems to be for most people that if I show that I'm a valuable resource, then people are just going to automatically reach in and reach into my inbox and then ask, I'd love to do business with you, how much for XYZ, and when are you available? And the truth is, yes, that does happen. But you'll find that in most cases, you have to make it a healthy mix of demonstrating value most of the time, and then after a while, coming out to make a specific ask. Because there are lots of people who are just lurking on the sidelines, and they're not going to take action until you ask them to do something. Now, what do you do before you ask? All the ideas that we have done so far, examined so far in the podcast, presuppose one thing. They presuppose that you already have an offer, that you already have a product. If you haven't created an offer and if you haven't created a product, then of course you're going to have that you're going to be at a psychological impasse and you're not going to ask for anything because you haven't created anything to ask in the first place. So back to the example of the lawyer who makes a podcast on the African Free Trade Continental Treaty. If this is your first time of listening to the podcast, all you have to do is, when you're done listening to this episode, you scroll back a couple of episodes, definitely before episode 550. Okay, well, that's just a guess. Let's just say 4 or 5 episodes. Something that has content in the title, educative or informative content, those kinds of titles, and you'll get a lot more details, especially where I use this real life example of a lawyer who has a podcast. She's based in Lagos, who has a podcast that is built exclusively around this piece of legislation, that is the African Free Trade Continental Act, or the Continental Treaty. So for a lawyer producing this kind of content on the podcast, after putting out a couple of episodes, well, I can't say how many you should put before you make your ask. If you are a follower of what's his name? Gosh, I can't remember his name. This guy that wrote Jab, 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 Right Hook. Well, there's a fellow who wrote, an influencer who wrote a book. He creates business content. He actually is a business operator because he has his own marketing agency and he ran his father's wine agency for a while. Yeah, Gary Vaynerchuk. Yeah, exactly. So Gary Vaynerchuk has this book, Jab, 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 Right Hook. And the idea is that you should deliver value, deliver value, deliver value. And then after a while, you have demonstrated your expertise and value to the market. And then when you ask for something, buy my product, buy my service, then people are going to end up buying. So that is the philosophy here. So if you are the lawyer doing the podcast around this piece of legislation, the jab, jab, jab is going to be all the offer, all the value that you're putting out there into the market. This is the legislation. This is how it started. If you are involved in the cassava trade, this is how it affects you. If you are involved in the textiles trade, this is how it affects you. If you sell services, you're an insurance agency in Nigeria doing business in Ghana, this is how it affects you, and then on and on and on. And then after a while, maybe a year of putting out this kind of content, you now come up with your ask to say, that we have this service, we do contract reviews where we give opinions for 20,000 naira or 30,000 naira. Of course, you have to spell out the ambit of what it is that you're offering. So in this case, all you're doing is just opinion. So it's not full redlining. It's just to have a look at the contract and to raise any red flags if need be. It's not a full-on contract review, rewriting the contract. So if you put that out after a year, they say this is what we have available. It's for 20,000 naira or 30,000 naira. How we craft the offer. Well, anyway, this is just an example and I'm thinking on the fly. So you come up with some sort of offer, something like this, and the odds are that after you've demonstrated your expertise for a while, there should be people who'll be willing to jump at the chance because you have shown that you have the expertise. You understand what the law is. You know how it affects import and export and different industries and then things of that nature. And if you've done a good job of building your listenership over the months or maybe year or two that you've been running this podcast, then the market should be ready for this ask. And then the same thing with the scenarios that we came up with for the beautician. It's after doing this for a while that you now put out your offer for face scrubs and lashes do over before Valentine's. The Valentine discount if you pay 20,000 naira before the 12th of February or something like that. So so that's it. So before you ask, you have to make sure that you have an offer or a product, something specific that you're going to ask people to take action on. Now, another mistake that people make when they put out offers is that they forget to include call to actions. So they end up putting out lots of promos, but with no strong call to actions there. Now, a call to action basically is just a next step that somebody ought to take to activate the offer that you're putting out there. So it's not just enough to put you create your flyer and it says Valentine's discount, blah, 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 something, and then you put that up on Instagram. It needs to have clear call to actions like buy now, call XYZ, share with X number of followers to qualify, DM me to qualify or to book your space before XYZ date, something like that. There has to be something specific that you're asking for. Now, if you follow all these steps that we've done so far, now remember, this episode 560 that we are on right now, isn't a standalone episode. It's an episode that has a couple of others prior that tie into them. So it's not just about listening to this episode, but if this is your first time listening, you have to listen to the episodes prior to see how everything ties together holistically to make sure that the content that you're putting out can generate sales for you. But it is possible. But remember, before we sign off, that we need to have the right expectations that generating profits, generating sales from your content is going to be a medium to a long-term strategy. It's not going to be a short-term play. So expect to do this for months or years, not days and weeks. If you think this whole month and year thing is too much stress, I'm not going to bother with it, then there are other plays that are available to you. And we have discussed some of those in the podcast before, and we'll discuss some of those in the podcast in the future. But this current train of thought that we've been exploring the past 5-6 couple of episodes was just to see how if content marketing, posting content, trying to leverage your authority and expertise, if that's the sort of thing that you're trying to do, then this is the way to go about it. So thank you very much for listening to episode 560. Thanks for your time and attention. I'll catch you guys at the next episode.